Hey, hi, hello, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Jess, and yes, I want to be like the cool kids, so I did get a new microphone and it is attached to a ruler. I could also just hold it myself, but I find this hilarious.
You know what's less hilarious? That I only recorded this in like left or right. I don't realize which one. I didn't record it in stereo. I'm sorry if you're wearing headphones. My bad.
I don't know if this is too reflective on this side, maybe this side. Uh, we're testing things out, so hopefully this sounds okay. Hey, what's going on? It's me. This is a wrap up. I have not one. What is filming? Hey, it's me. I have not done a wrap up in a while, and so I'm going to wrap up some books that I've read over the last couple of months. Not all of them, because not all of them I even have thoughts about because they were whatever. A few of them I may have a separate video for, so I won't speak on them too much here. I'll point you in that direction. But it is the beginning of a new month. Somehow it's September. And so I figured, why not? Let's do one. So let's get started. So, The Lion Woman of Tehran by Marjan Kamali. I read this with book club, and this is a historical fiction novel set in mostly Tehran in Iran. It starts in the 50s, and mostly the 50s through like the 70s, but we do get some I think early 80s in the United States, and then the end we get more present day. So this story really focuses on friendship. This author also wrote The Stationery Shop, I believe was the book. I have not read that one, but I heard a lot of good things about it. That one may have more of a romantic storyline, but this was really a story of friendship. About these young girls and their friendship over the years and all of the ups and downs that came with that, with political turmoil and them not being on different sides of what was going on in the country, but one having who was more, who wanted to be an activist, who wanted to make changes, who had all these ambitions and like wanted to protest and go out and do all these things, and another who was very comfortable with the life that she had and didn't want to ruffle any feathers or mess that up. And so our characters, Ellie is our main character, and she has a life of privilege up to a certain point. Her father dies when she's very young. This happens, like, you find out the first chapter. It's not a spoiler. Her father dies, and with this takes away their large home and the people who worked in the home. Her and her mother have to move basically downtown, which is seen less than desirable, and live in a small apartment. And she enrolls in school there, but there she meets Homa, and at first is just wary of her because this is the first like person she's really interacting with and talking with in this new neighborhood, and her mother is very disapproving of Homa, but they build this wonderful relationship and they have a lot of fun. They're very young, but they're very studious, and anyway, they spend years together building this wonderful friendship, although Ellie's mother never approves. Later, several years later, when their fortunes change and they move back to like the wealthier area and into a big home, Ellie and Homa obviously are split up. They try to stay in contact, but that doesn't work out. And so we see years later, basically when they're in high school and they're reunited. And it was very interesting to see how that happened and see the differences in them. And so then the story, we go through college and then into young adulthood. Again, I said we skip a little bit further and then present day. But we mainly get perspectives from Ellie. We do get a few POV chapters from Homa. And some of it was just so heartbreaking. And even though it's happening to two women in Iran in the 50s through the 80s, it still is very relevant to today, especially because of the different political movements and upheavals that were going on in Iran during these various times. And Homa was she wanted to be a judge and she wanted to get rights for women and rights for everyone. And I know very little about the history of Iran. A little bit from social media. But that's discussed in this book as well. And again, once Ellie moves back to her place of privilege, she's very much influenced by her mother and the people that she's going to school with, because she goes to this very elite school, and is like, why would I go protest? Why would I want to shake up things when things are working out well enough for me and my family at this moment? But Homa is still she's coming, she's taking a bus into the city. She's still living where she was before. And so it's just very interesting, because you see a lot of that now with people who are very comfortable with the status quo because it doesn't affect them. They're like, I'm fine. Why should I care? Why should I protest? Why should I vote for that? I'm fine. So I didn't expect going into this historical fiction for it to feel so relevant to now. And through discussing it with my book club, someone has heard the author speak, I think, at a book festival, and she was just writing from like her experience and didn't necessarily write it to be like, ooh, this is going to be so relatable. And I was saying when we were discussing the book that it's both like wow and also sad that so many things like this have happened in so many countries over the world at various times. Like as we're looking at what's happening right now, a lot of people just like to harken back to the 1930s and 40s in Germany with the World War II. But like so many of these movements have happened in multiple countries, various decades, and it's like the history is right there. We obviously don't learn all of it from our public school system or even private school system in America, but there's just so many examples of how this happens, and we just continue to repeat it. And I don't think that's by mistake. I think it's by design. The whole, if you don't know history, you're doomed to repeat it. I think also there are people who know history and they are purposefully repeating it. So anyway, I think that was a really great book. I gave it 4 stars. And I do recommend it. I would like to read The Stationery Shop. I had an e-arc from NetGalley. Thank you so much. For Psycho, Pomp, and Circumstance by Eden Royce. I think this is by Tor, and it's a novella. Eden Royce wrote the middle grade book Root Magic, which I loved, which was set in like the 1960s in South Carolina. Thought it was fantastic. I recommend even for adults. But this was an adult novel, or no, novella. So I was really excited. The cover, which of course I'll insert in here, is so gorgeous and creepy. And the premise was saying that in this world, so it's like a Southern Gothic historical fantasy story. So in this world, it's in New Charleston. Essentially, our main character, what's her name? Fee. She's born into, her family are free Black people, business owners. She has an aunt that has been distanced from the family, and she like kind of knows, but kind of doesn't know why, and she passes. And so in this world, the pomp and circumstance of planning and executing a homegoing or funeral is very important. Like if you take on this honor, is very serious. You have to, all these people come to basically audition to be like the person who's presiding over the ceremony. If you don't go through with it, you can like end up in jail. So a big thing. And she takes this on, although her parents don't want her to do that for numerous reasons. And again, another book I didn't expect to be so relatable. This book made me emotional at times. And again, it's a novella. I'm just going to call it a book. It goes by very quickly. I read it in like one sitting. But her journey, because she has to leave the town that she's grown up in, this is her first time stepping out from her parents. And again, not with their support, which is a huge thing. She learns quickly about some family history, some things that may have been presented as one way, and that really wasn't the truth. Learns what her aunt sacrificed to leave, but also what she built where she went. And that she might have lost her family that she was born into, but she built like a community and family of her own. I would have given this 5 stars. My only complaint is that from the title, the description, the cover, I really thought it would be creepier. There are creepy elements with some of the like creatures and things that happen. But I just thought it would be creepier, but I still think it was a really impactful novella. It just gets straight to the point. I also wish there was more about the pomp and circumstance funeral planning, because it's made to seem like that's a central part. And while it is integral to the story, we don't get the details of that. And I don't need it like step by step, but I think that could have been interesting. Like we do get to see all the people who are coming to try to wow her, to try to get her to, have their business be the one in charge, but that's really it. And then we kind of skip ahead to that happening, and I understand why. If she's just trying to, maybe that wasn't the focus, and these other focuses about becoming independent, about going against what stepping out without support of family, uncovering family secrets, which I loved and I still think is really great. And so I think everyone should read it. And if she decides to, or I hope that she does, write more in this like this kind of world, this new Charleston, and like the town that the aunt moved to, I would love to read that because it would be very interesting. I feel like there could be multiple novellas set in this world, and they could all be really, really awesome. I read them all. Then I read Clean Sweep, or not then I read, but I read Clean Sweep by Ilona Anderson? Andrews. Ilona Anderson. What? Ilona Andrews, which is a writing duo, I believe. I've heard of them for years. Never read anything by them. And I asked Mara where I should start. And so she asked me like what I wanted anyway. She told me Clean Sweep, and I read it, and I had such a good time. It was another one that I read, I think in like 2 sittings and 2 days. It was just a fun sci-fi time, but it's like set at a bed and breakfast in Texas, but she is the keeper of this home, and all of these creatures, beings can come there, and it's like a sanctuary. So there's vampires, there's werewolves, there's other things, and there's like this mystery going on in her little Texas town, and she's got to work with a local werewolf to figure out what's going on, and obviously to keep their happenings, their world quiet from the normies. And it was just fun. I liked the magic, I liked the different creatures, I liked the writing. And it's not like, again, I gave this one 4 stars. 5 stars would have to be like out of this world, original, new, but it did still feel new. I don't know. It was sci-fi on like planet Earth, so it was still very contemporary. Like she goes to Costco at one point in the story, but it was the blend worked for me. There was banter that I really enjoyed. There were moments I laughed. I really liked, like, the house is somewhat sentient. I always love that in a story. And so I really liked it. I know there's more. I definitely want to continue reading because it just was like, it just satisfied an itch I had, where it was like fantastical, but also science fiction, but like not too heavy, but it was the perfect mix. So I don't have a lot of like unique thoughts to say about that one, except like I was feeling slumpy. I didn't know what to read, and that satisfied. I had me a good little time. I did. Quickly, I will say that I finally finished Bury Our Bones, The Midnight Soul by V.E. Schwab. I started that book months ago. I had an e-arc and I finally finished it, and what a drag. It makes me really sad, but I just thought that, again, premise awesome. I do like her writing, but I think it was so long, so repetitive, and to me, the character work left a lot to be desired, and for like lesbian vampires over time. And maybe I also went into it thinking, ooh, is this going to be like something else that I love as much as Addie LaRue? Maybe that set me up, but it just dragged on for too long, where I was like, I don't care. And especially, I can't even think of their names because they're just not memorable to me. So that was a womp womp, 2 stars, I think. I also have a video, not on that one, but on Why Fish Don't Exist. I had to rant about it. It's 80% biography of this man and 20% memoir of the author. I don't recommend it, but if you're curious, I'll link that video and I'll tell you all about it, okay? Save yourself the time. I also read Angels and Demons by Dan Brown. I saw them in Barnes and Noble, and I texted Olivia and I was like, do you think I would like these? Because I know that she's read them and had a good time. She's like, I think you would, and the audiobooks are really good. So like I owned Angels and Demons and the Da Vinci Code years ago, and I unhauled them at some point. So I got the audio for Angels and Demons, and let me tell you, a good time was had. I'm like, I'm not mad about this. I let me tell you, is this like the best story ever written? No, but the pacing is so good. From the first chapter, I was hooked. Now, I've seen the Da Vinci Code movie. I don't know if I saw Angels and Demons, and there might be a third one. And I did start this book years ago. So, like, the first maybe 20% felt familiar, but like from that first chapter, I was hooked. And like, if you just the whole Illuminati of it, secret society, we're going to Rome, well, to the Vatican City. There's things hidden, something's going on. And with the science also, it was perfect. And it was just like bam, bam, bam. Just when you're like, all right, when we're wrapping this up, something happening. And then I think listened to it in 2 days. And then it's like wrapping up. And I'm like, oh my God, who's gonna, is someone gonna die? What's gonna happen? Cause I don't remember. I don't think I saw the movie, so this was like, I don't know how this wraps up. I don't know what's gonna happen. So it was a good time. I had a good time. Now, Olivia did say, don't like read them all in a row because they're very formulaic. So I took a break. I will be back though and listen to the Da Vinci Code eventually. But wow, a good time. There were a few books that I read that were all very middle of the road. I did a Patreon vlog for this, but those were The Last Murder at the End of the World, Honey and Spice, and The Day the World Stopped Shopping. The Raven Scholar was one I did read, which another excellent fantasy book. I was reading it and I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't expect the main character to be a black woman. I was like, did I miss something? And I went to look at the author. She is a white woman, but the character was a black woman, which I will say. And she's older, I think in her 30s. And she comes across as if that makes sense, because sometimes there are characters who are a certain age and you're like, you're not acting like an adult. But I really enjoy The Raven Scholar. It is an adult fantasy that has all these different like kind of like houses, and there is a competition. And so I was like, oh, is this just gonna, that can be really fun and really engaging when it's done well. And then it also can just feel really like they're just taking from other stories. But I thought this was really original. It felt like all the people from their like individual houses were very distinct. Even if there were a lot of side characters, they all felt very well developed and like they had their own personalities. I will say what stops for being a 5-star for me is that maybe because there's so many side characters, even though we're with Nima, I didn't feel as connected with her and like rooting for her as I would if I'm like, oh my God, I love her so much. She's my new favorite character. But it still was such a good time. There were things that I was like, okay, I see where this is going. I think this is going to happen. And then I was wrong, but not in a way that just came out of left field. I was like, oh my gosh, wait, that makes so much sense. I didn't think about that. And then the setup for the next one, I also loved. At first, it kind of threw me, but I loved how the narrator for the story was ravens, and like how it would just seem like a normal third person omniscient narrator, but then it would change to where like directly they're like speaking to you. And I really liked that. At first, I was kind of confused, but I really liked the narration and just the different houses and the creatures and how that all worked, and the history and the mystery. A really good time. There are a few other ones, but I do have to change my camera battery because why not? I feel like these batteries are dying a lot faster than they used to, but I'm going to set that up and then talk about the last few books, and that'll be my wrap up. Okay, fresh new battery. We're back. Okay, we left out on the Raven Scholar. Fantastic. We'll be reading the next one. Probably will have to reread or at least get some kind of refresher from the first one because there was a lot that happened, but I do recommend that one. The next one is a nonfiction called Bad Company, Private Equity and the Death of the American Dream. This was really good. However, note, very depressing. Because if you don't know, especially if you are outside of America, because I don't know how this is happening in other countries, I wouldn't be surprised if it is, private equity is ruining everything. And that's basically private companies that come in and buy up other businesses and basically run them into the ground. They make it seem as if they're coming in to save them, but really they are just getting money for the shareholders and whoever are at the top of their businesses, and then the actual business just starts to flounder and eventually closes. Think Toys R Us. They have some other examples. I liked that the book was told, was it three or four people? So we're following someone who worked for Toys R Us, someone who was a doctor and was working for a small hospital in, I think, Wyoming, that eventually got bought out by private equity. So did Toys R Us. Someone else who was working for, I think she was an activist, and she also lived in these apartments outside of DC that were bought up by a private equity company. And there might have been someone else. Oh, there was someone who was a journalist and had worked at different newspapers in Texas and I think maybe also in Illinois. And so they talk about those being bought up by private equity. Like, they are in everything. They're in healthcare. That's including dental. They're getting into veterinarian clinics, private, like small, or I mean, single family homes, apartments, mobile home parks, newspapers, big businesses. Like, they're in everything, and it's terrifying. And there was a little bit at the end of like, here's some hopeful things, of some things that I forgot exactly what it was. Like, here's some progress or some things that have been made, but like, she goes through all of the things, like why they get into these certain areas, how it works out for them financially. One of the things I believe was that a lot of them will, they're really invested in the real estate of a business, and then so they will buy like the land and the building that these businesses occupy, and then now the business or like the owner of that company is now also paying rent to them, which usually also puts them in the hole financially. I feel like I heard about a private equity business coming in to buy Jersey Mike's, unsure, but they really just come in, and once that happens, it's all downhill from there. Look what happened to Joann's. They're no good. So if you want to know more about private equity, why it's terrible, how it works, I would recommend that one. I read The Marriage Act by John Mars. I think this is the third one I've read by him, and he's got some kind of mind. This one also, so if you've read like The One, which I think had a series on Netflix, this is basically the same world. Like, that happened and now this is happening. And it's wild because in this world, essentially, people who choose to have their marriage a smart marriage. So it's essentially like their house, their vehicles, their watches are programmed with something like Alexa that's always listening in. So if you start arguing, if you're starting to have a lot of disagreements, it'll be like, hey, we're going to recommend that you say this to your partner. And if it gets to another level, they're like, hey, we're going to recommend you for counseling. And so like there's benefits, like people who sign up for these smart marriages, they get, they live in nicer areas. I think they make more money. Like there's all these benefits. And then if you decide to opt out of that, then it's harder for you to live in a nice area or have a nice job, all these things. I could be wrong, but it's basically like that. And there's a lot of POVs, which at first I was like, how am I supposed to keep up with all these people? And then eventually it became like easier. And they're all connected in a way, but you don't realize that for a while. So it was really satisfying to learn how they were related and then how their stories were intersecting. And if you've read John Mars, you know it gets wild, and it does. And I was like, what's crazy about this isn't that far-fetched anymore with all of the wearable tech, all of the listening devices that we have, the way that we agree to all of these things, and they just take our data and listen in any way you, and if you don't agree, I'm like, this isn't that far-fetched. So it was wild because you're getting a POV from like an influencer, and that story was crazy. You're seeing somebody who's like opposing it, like opposing the government mandates, because of course it's a government thing. Somebody who is working for the government, who is supporting this thing. It is wild. It was a wild time. I'll say it was a bit long. Like after a while, I was like, okay, can we wrap this up? But still, it was still very satisfying, especially once you get the conclusions of like how it all comes together. I still had a really good time. And I will continue to read John Mars because he has some funky ideas that always pan out for me. Problematic Summer Romance by Ali Hazelwood. This is another rant I did. I'll link that video. Womp womp. Please don't write an age gap book. Call it Problematic Summer Romance and then proceed to spend 80% of the book telling us, oh my God, we have such a large age gap. It's so problematic. What? Waste of time. I also listened to Bad Blood, Secrets and Lies in a Silicon Valley Startup by John Carreyrou. This is about Elizabeth Holmes and her shisty ass company called, what was it called? Whatever her little blood company was called. This was so infuriating because I knew about Elizabeth Holmes. She is now in prison. And so I knew about her briefly, but I didn't know her whole story and how she began and her weird relationship with that dude. And the biggest takeaway from this, because essentially if you want to learn the whole story about, you know, her beginnings and how she got to where she was, then obviously listen to the book. My biggest thing and why this was hard for me to get through at some points, because I was so infuriated with how little she had produced and how much money she kept getting. How many people just were like, oh, she's intimidating. She adopted this like persona to look like Steve Jobs with a black turtleneck, and she's a smart white woman, and she just got all of this funding from investors, from people who work for billion-dollar industries who just believed in her without a product. Or when she had one, it wasn't even the final mock-up. It didn't even work. They were manipulating data. Like, oh my God. I'm like, there are people who work hard, create tangible things and can't get funding. And she got billions of dollars. She got billions of dollars off of thoughts and dreams and blue-eyed beauty. And it pissed me off, but it was very interesting and it's worth a listen, but you're going to be mad. I can't remember all the details, but I think her new boyfriend is trying to do some kind of similar startup now, recently. And I'm like,
Since being imprisoned at a federal facility in Bryan, Texas, Holmes has been providing advice to her partner, Billy Evans, on the startup, according to sources. The precise nature of Holmes' supporting Evans on the venture is unclear. The goddamn audacity.
Lastly, I'll say I read a short novel or novella called A Short Stay in Hell by Stephen Peck. And this was really good and also terrifying because it's basically this guy dies and goes to hell, but it's not like Christian hell. It is hell of a different religion. The God there is, I can't remember, but so he was a faithful Mormon and he goes to hell, and the God that comes there is not like the God of the Mormon faith. And so that brings up a lot of questions. And then also it's like, maybe it seems at the beginning this is not so bad because there's a way to get out. The way is to find your story in all these books, but of course it's infinite. And there's like every iteration, every possibility of a book. So maybe there's only a period in this book. Maybe there's only 2 words in this book. And that they spend all this time looking for it. And it's just like this. It's terrifying because it's just the sheer volume, the amount of infinity. That's it. This infinite amount of time, infinite amount of books. So like at first it's like, yes, I can find my story, I can get out of here. And then the time, and like, how do you even keep time that just continues to pass? And like, there's other people there that they form relationships with, but then there's times where there's like little gangs forming and there's all this violence and like they can't die. It was truly horrifying because of those things. Like there was no escaping. And so it's like, are there worse things than death? And like, what is infinity? You can't, there's no, what? It was, I really liked it. Also was like terrified. Oh my God. Please let there just be nothing after all this. Let me go to sleep. But that's it. those are the most memorable reads I've had in the last several months. I don't even know the last time I did a wrap up. Who knows what is life? It's September. I don't know what's going on. I'm trying to survive, taking it a day at a time. Sometimes it's hour by hour. So I hope you're taking care of yourself, taking your medicine, drinking water, wearing sunscreen, resting, moving your body if and when you can. Eat that sweet treat, okay? Have that toast and butter. Eat the carbs. Watch TV. Listen to good music. Do things that you enjoy, because life is short and it's also very stressful. So, have you read anything good recently? Do you think I would like it? If so, tell me below. Have you read any of these? Have any thoughts? We're almost in the last quarter of the year. That's, I don't know how that happened, but yeah. Take care of yourself. Thank you for watching. Stay blessed, hydrated, moisturized, and sunscreen. I'll see you in my next one. Bye.